Hello, my name is Daryl Inso, and this is a project about the plague. What is it? A plague is an infectious disease that's caused by the bacteria Yersinia pestis. Yersinia is named in honor of Alexander Yersin, who successfully isolated the bacteria in 1894 during the pandemic that began in China in the late 1800s. This is the map of the world distribution of the plague in 1998. As you can see, the plague has reached the major continents of the world. The first major pandemic began in Egypt, and it continued on for 60 years, killing 100 million people. The second pandemic began in the 14th century. It started out in Central Asia and it spread to Europe, where a quarter to half the total population died, and the major cause of the spread of Europe was a battle against the Mongols. At the time, the population of England was estimated to be about 4 million, yet within a mere 2.5 years, about 1/3 of them died, and 1/3 of the residents in Florence died as well in the first 6 months. Following after, Venice lost 60% of its populace, and death was so rampant that the Pope had to consecrate the Rhone River so the corpse could be dumped into it. This painting is from Pieter in his 1562 work, The Triumph of Death. And in this picture, it describes the European culture when it encountered the plague, and how it was not uncommon to see so much death at one time. During the war with the European nation, the Mongols were one of the first to practice biological warfare. When besieging a castle, they catapulted plague-infested bodies to wipe out the people on the other side. Afterwards, the outbreak accelerated even further, because the dead were heaped in piles and flea-infested rats and dogs fed on the corpse, thus extending the transmission of the disease. Roof and walls were made of straw and floors of dirt, and animals were kept inside, and people rarely bathed, and fleas were common. In this children's rhyme, it gives us an insight associated with the time. It goes like this: ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posy, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. And rosies symbolize the rosary beads. Presumably, people tried to gain divine intercession against this mysterious enemy, and most plague victims emitted rather strong and foul odor, so the flowers, or posies, were carried around to mask the smell. And ashes to ashes, we all fall down. Ashes resemble what was left of the burnt corpse, and falling down meaning to die. Measures they used to combat this mysterious enemy were rather unorthodox, well, to our standards, but that's because it was before the germ theory, and I'll describe the germ theory later on. And they used methods such as burning incense, dipping handkerchief in aromatic oils, ringing church bells, firing cannons, wearing talismans, bathing in urine, which was kind of gross, placing dead animals in the house, bloodletting by leeches, drinking pus extracted from the bubo, I'll explain that also, applying dried toads to relieve the pain of the bubo by absorbing the poisons, drinking liquid gold or powdered emeralds, which was obviously exclusive to the rich, and becoming a flagellant. Flagellants were religious extremists that believed that they wronged God in the ultimate degree, and the only way for the mysterious enemy to disappear was to inflict pain on each other. It was hard for historians to explain the high rate of mortality in the 1348 breakout in Europe, which was the second pandemic, so they concluded that there was more than one variety of the plague, such as the meningeal plague or the pharyngeal plague. The bubonic plague is the most commonly seen form of the Black Death. The term bubonic refers to bubo, and in Greek it means groin, and it describes the enlarged lymphatic glands. And usually the bubonic plague is spread by being bitten by an infected flea or rodent. In rare cases, Yersinia pestis, the bacteria that causes the bubonic plague, is present on a piece of contaminated clothes or other materials used by an infected person that may enter through an opening in the skin. The bacteria are rarely spread from person to person. The incubation period varies but usually lasts 2 to 6 days. Incubation means the time between infection and symptoms. The symptoms include buboes, of course, which you can see from this picture. It's located in the armpit, neck, or groin, and it ranges from the size of 1 to 10 centimeters. And 70% of all patients with bubonic plague have this. And to continue on with the symptoms, it includes fever, headache, abdominal pain, chill, diarrhea, which may be bloody, nausea, decreased appetite, tiny broken blood vessels, and vomiting. The mortality rate at the second epidemic ranged from 30 to 75%, and there are two outcomes that followed. If the fever broke, that means the bacteria your body has entered into remission and the immune system has gained the upper hand over the pathogen, which it then proceeds to destroy and expel the bacteria. If the fever doesn't break, the infection spreads to the blood, causing septicemia and death. As the plague rages throughout the population, the plague can change to a more virulent form as it enters the lungs. The pneumonic plague is the second most commonly seen form of the Black Death, and the pneumonic plague is highly contagious and is transmitted by aerosol droplets as victims cough up blood. And the incubation period for this plague is 1 to 3 days, and after that, symptoms begin to appear. Symptoms include fever, weakness, headache, and rapidly developing pneumonia. And when they cough, they excrete a slimy sputum tinted with blood, and sputum is saliva mixed with mucus. And the mortality rate for this disease is 75% despite appropriate plague treatment, and 10 to 20% of the bubonic plague patients receive this. The septicemic plague. Okay, before I start with this, I want to tell you that the pneumonic plague and the septicemic plague were probably seen less than the bubonic plague because the victims most likely died before they could reach other places. And this was because of the lack of transportation or the inefficiency of it. So imagine if they had trains, planes, and automobiles. Okay, this form gave rise to the Black Death, to the name the Black Death, because of its symptoms. And this spread through the bites of an infected flea or rodent, and it could enter through an opening in the skin. Basically the same as, it could be spread as the same as the bubonic form. Now, the bubonic plague symptoms can progress rapidly to the septicemic plague symptoms. And symptoms include chills, fever, rapid heart rate, severe headache, nausea, vomiting, delirium, and death. And in septicemia, the blood vessels break and leak under the skin, causing a dark rash as the blood dries. The mortality rate for this form is 50 to 90%. Yersinia pestis is the bacteria that caused the plague. Now, it can grow with or without oxygen. Animals that are known to carry the bacteria include rodents and insects like rats, prairie dogs, and fleas. During an outbreak, the bacteria can survive for months in cool, moist condition. Yersinia pestis is a non-motile, non-spore-forming, pleomorphic, meaning it has multiple forms, and a gram-negative coccobacillus. The world is currently in the third pandemic, which began in China during the 1890s when infected rats were inadvertently transported on ships to other countries like America and the rest of Asia and Africa. According to the World Health Organization, Tanzania and Vietnam were heavily affected, and there are 20 to 25 cases in U.S. a year, and Arizona and New Mexico are the hot spots for the Black Plague. In regards to bioterrorism, we talked before about the pneumonic plague and how it could be transported or transmitted through aerosol droplets. Yersinia pestis bacterium is widely available in microbiology banks around the world, and thousands of scientists have worked with it, making biological attack a serious concern. In regards to prevention, the good news is we have the medical technology, meaning a decreased mortality, and we understand the concept of the germ theory, meaning that microorganisms exist and they can cause disease, meaning no flagellants. And the most effective way to prevent plague is to reduce the rodent and flea population by using proper sanitation, rodenticides, and insecticides. The plague organism is vulnerable to antibiotics such as streptomycin, chloramphenicol, and tetracycline if treatment is started within 15 hours of the first symptom. In conclusion, be careful whenever you go to plague-infested areas. You want to watch out for flea bites. Be careful whenever you come in contact with a patient or a potential host or a sick animal or a rodent. And Also, whenever you go out camping, hiking, hunting, or fishing, you want to watch out. And that's it. Thank you for your time and consideration. I hope I didn't scare you too much.